Welcome to Ladies in Law, where real-world advice meets professional wisdom and empowerment in realms of law and business. Your hosts, Lisa Goucher, Dawn Smith, and Kellye Raymond, bring you innovative strategies, practical guidance, and inspirational stories. Join us as we inspire and support women to thrive in traditionally male-dominated fields. We're here to promote inclusivity and provide practical advice for success.
Hey, this is Dawn. I just wanted to tell you we're so excited. This is the 20th episode, and we're so excited to have a special guest today, Susan Hawk. We hope you enjoy it.
So today, with your practice, and you have such meaningful work, how do you manage that? Like, how have you shifted to find the balance with being such an overachiever, Susan?
Well, I don't know if overachiever. What I know to do is, everybody's brain works different, right? We all have, and my brain works so fast. Like I can get like stuff done really quick, and then I'll take, then I step back and I take a break, and then because especially starting your own practice solo by yourself, I don't.
Yes, that's what we wanted.
I am like, I just creating this thing out of nowhere. I worked for the government for 20 years.
So, why did you?
No business.
How did you make that decision?
Because that's the way I do things. Always the very hardest way.
Right before COVID, too.
I've always said it's the path of most resistance. This is my mantra.
Right. So let's talk about kind of logistically just starting.
How did you do it?
Well, first off, I worked with an executive coach first, and I knew her, and we did, we sat down and really talked. After I resigned in 2016, I didn't leave my house for a year. The second year, I could barely do anything. So it was a process. This has been years of me going to therapy, getting help, getting on the right medication, which is another thing I'm an advocate for people. I know some people aren't, but if you can find a psychiatrist that can help you and keep finding one. If you don't like it, find another one. Keep trying.
Let's stop there for just a second.
Yeah.
We certainly want to spend a ton of time on your practice and
that's okay. No, this is more important. This is important.
I think it is hugely important. I think a lot of people that struggle don't realize that you don't have to struggle alone, and seeing a good psychiatrist that can get you on a medication to help in the same way that going to yoga might help, right? But sometimes you just can't do it alone.
No, I think we all have, our brain chemistry is different and the way it works. And also if you go through a severe depression, and my psychiatrist explained it like this, you can go through such a severe depression. It's almost like getting over a brain injury, and you have to treat that, and you have to do, and the chemicals in your brain are off, they're imbalanced. You're not crazy. That doesn't mean you're crazy. As women, we know that that's the go-to. And I had a hard time for when I'd leave the house, and I would think people would recognize me, and I'm like, oh God, do they think I'm crazy? And, because all that stuff was all out there, and it builds, and I had to really, really work hard to get within myself and say, okay, you're going to have to do it. I don't want to live in, kind of that flight or fright thing all the time, worried about what, every time I go in public, I have this feeling like, oh, I wonder what, and I just, thinking, and I felt like that for years. And I finally just said, I can't do this anymore. It is draining everything out of me. And I'm not going to stay at home for the rest of my life. I want to do something. So I started working with a great executive coach, and we just talked about it. And she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I'm good at what I did. I was really good at it.
Yeah.
And I still want to be good at it. And I think that I can add meaning and, start practicing. So I started very slowly, just taking referrals from other attorneys for criminal cases. Had no clue how to e-file. All these things that have changed.
Freaking that hurts my ears.
My God, I had to create a PDF file by myself. And it took me a week.
I think that is so, I think a lot of people that think about starting their own business or their own firm, they think have to dive into the deep end, but you really don't.
Well, I thought I was just going to go practice law and it's going to be great and all these things. I was like,
now you're PDFing.
But I was so determined to learn because I thought, okay, I'm the only one. I can't afford to hire anybody right now. I've got to learn how to do this. And if I ever have to do it, I want to know how to do it. I could go in and try cases still. I knew I could still walk into a courtroom, and that is where I feel the most comfortable. because I was in the courtroom 10 years is where I tried all my, every day was where I was most comfortable. But trying to create a practice that's different, I think, is what I'm trying to do, is a kind of a different approach to it.
Well, especially during COVID.
Yeah, I took that time off.
We've met many a time, and this is the first time I've actually been able to just give you a hug because all of the work that we
had a
did
case
during
together
COVID.
during that time.
Yes, and it was all Zoom, and now we're finally.
And that is where I learned how to e-file, because I swear, I said, by my name in e-file, there's going to be like a dunce hat for like dumb girl filing. Let's reject it.
It's hard. It's not easy. It has nothing to do with being
Dumb girl filing it. Let's all reject. I mean, I got so many rejections, and I was like, by God, I'm going to get this right if it kills me. But
so now did you get to a point where you could set up a structure?
I have a case management system now. I have someone who works for me. We have, all my booking and all law pay and everything is. So I developed a foundation first.
Yeah. So tell us how you developed this. Like you decided
I got two really smart people that are much smarter than me to come in and help, because I had no idea what I was doing.
It's always the best advice.
And I mean, I know what I'm good at, and I so know what I'm not good at. And I wasn't good at those skills because I'd never learned those skills. I thought I could buy books and read and learn.
You do not need to be the subject matter expert on everything. That's when you bring people in.
Yeah. So I was very lucky because one of my best friends from high school had started a small business, and she's just smart and she knows how to do processes. And then she went to SMU and was really interested in the criminal justice system too. And she had interned at the DA's office, which she was at SMU. Yeah. So she has a interest in it. I had to give a shout out to her, Stacey Houston, because she works with me, and she is really. We've been able to kind of just take my practice to another level.
It's so important to find good people to help you in the things that you're not
doing. And,
yourself.
and as we knew, Holly Mason Baronet started doing my marketing, and they are fantastic. And I got to tell you, they spent so much time with me to learn about me before they did my marketing. It wasn't something that we just,
personal.
That we just, they spent a lot of time getting to know what I was about, what I cared about, what I wanted. And so we've been working together for a year and a half, and that's, it's a slow drip on the marketing.
Sure.
And it's, that's definitely been worth it for me. They're fantastic.
I think that's a really good takeaway also. And you reminded me of that when you were talking about finding a good therapist, right? That's the
okay, yeah.
And I think it's true for just whoever you're going to work with, whether it be a therapist or hiring people and getting people to help you out with your firm, is some of the best advice that I got from a good friend of mine when I was looking for a therapist was, if you go to see somebody and you don't like them, right, or you don't click, don't think you have to keep going.
Yeah.
And I think this is true for hiring people and working with, vendors or marketing folks or whoever it is that you are bringing in to help your company. Try them out, but if it's not a good fit, don't give up on the process.
Especially on mental health.
Yes.
I mean, it is.
It's not always going to be the right fit right away. I'd say kind of make sure that it's not a good fit. Don't give up right away, but then keep looking for somebody.
And I think that was when people ask me, what do you most regret? And I will say that I didn't get help sooner. Because in my 30s, I started, I noticed in my 30s, if I just kept, and then I would feel better. And then I'm like, okay, I don't need to go back anymore, right? The smartest thing I did is when I started feeling better, I kept going.
Yeah.
And then I was able to really dig deeper into what's going on and been able to kind of, really learn more that way.
So funny that you say that, because I was off to therapy last Friday and it had been a great day. We just bought a horse and I was so excited. And my husband's like, why are you going to therapy? Everything's so good. You don't, and I'm like, it's not just for when everything is in the shit. It's good to just keep going and just
the best therapy sessions I've ever had are the ones I thought I should cancel because I'm doing so good. Why don't I need therapy? And then I have a session. I'm like, this is the best session we had.
Yeah.
And so that's my one regret, because of course I regret that I couldn't complete my term. That's a big, but you can't live on that. You just have to go forward and know that good things are happening there, and it is as it should be. And then you move forward and just figure out what you can do.
Yeah. So let's if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit more about the work that you're doing now and really advocating for mental health in criminal defendants.
And I do all criminal defense, so it's not just mental health yet. But of course, I have a passion for that, and I also talk to them. I've developed these relationships where I work with someone who deals only with placement of individuals in treatment. She travels all over the country. She knows is the best places for people to go, where if their insurance will take it. With that, so when I get a client who needs help, and it's evident they're in a mental health crisis, as opposed to let's just wait and see what the prosecutor is going to offer, and let's see if you get indicted. And no, I'm all over it. Like, I'm getting all the records, I'm getting everything, and I want to show the prosecutor, whoever's handling the case, I want to show them who my client is before they read a terrible police report about something
day of their life,
and that they're in treatment and they're doing this, and this is what was going on. So I'm really proactive on that end, and I've gotten really good results, and I've had very fair prosecutors that I've worked with, and the systems work. So when you see the system work, I'm a believer in it. So,
did you talk to anybody else that was handling their criminal defense practice like that? Or was this just something?
This is just things that I'm sure, I'm not saying there isn't anybody who does that, because they're great criminal defense attorneys out there.
I just think that's really smart. I mean, I just think building the case from the ground up like that.
Well, I think it's just being a judge and because I always was pretty creative in my sentencing. I think I tried to be. I didn't just, I tried. I mean, of course, I was human, and I'm sure, mistakes, whatever, you tried your very best every day. But I would always try to do things a little bit different to give them, a chance at the end. A chance. Rehabilitation was always number one for me. But, there's some crimes that are different. But I think that when you're giving them a mitigation packet or a mitigation information before they even start, it's only going to help your client, especially when they're in a crisis. And if I can find them a treatment facility that they're going and look what they're doing right now. I mean, I've had individuals that are charged with felonies, and they'd let them leave the state to go to a different state to stay in treatment for a certain amount of time.
It just sounds, I'm certainly not as immersed in the criminal defense world as you, but that sounds like a real shift in the way just criminal justice reform is taking positive steps.
And it is evolving. I mean, I will say how
was it like when you first were in the DA's
Well, in the
office?
90s, I mean, it was all about tough on crime. Mm-hmm. It was all, you touted your conviction rates. You did, and to me, that does not define success anymore. But I also was really lucky when I was 25 when I started. December 18th, 1995. I was 23 when I started going to the DA's office.
I can't believe you were on the bench at 31.
32.
32.
But, I'd already tried the worst of the worst. Mm-hmm. So when all these other cases came in front of me, it was kind of a gift, because I was like, well, let's see what we can do differently. Yeah, this isn't, but I just, in the 90s, it was different. I think it's 2000. And then now we have specialty courts all over the place. So the whole criminal justice system has evolved, and I've watched it, and it's been great. But I've been a believer from the second that I got on the bench that we have to do something different, because warehousing people in the penitentiary, and they're getting these 180 days, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, they're back on the street. And the way it works in criminal law is that each time you go to the penitentiary, you get enhanced. So then the next time they come in, they're 25 to life, and so, just doing.
It's just a really bad merry-go-round.
Yeah. And I had good criminal defense attorneys that have been practicing a long time that said, you got to look, that gave me advice on how to be a better prosecutor, as opposed to just, I tried the cases that needed to be tried, I believed.
Let's talk specifically about being a prosecutor. And I've seen a lot of great women prosecutors, but I think sometimes women lawyers in general, not just prosecutors, think I've got to be really aggressive in order to get my my point across, and they see maybe their counterpart who's a male being aggressive, and that works for them. And there are so many times where I have spoken to jurors after a case, and they're like, "Oh, woman lawyer, you did a great job, but you were too aggressive. You're kind of a bitch." I'm like, "What?"
Some good advice I got too, and this is from a defense attorney: go find a prosecutor that has a personality like you, and go watch them in trial. You're never going to find someone who's like you, but
sure.
More is kind of your style, and go watch them.
That's a great piece of advice.
And did you do that?
Well, I had a really good judge that I was in front of her, and I always she swore me in on every, for every elected position. But Judge Molly Francis, I was in front of her and watched her and her style and how, as a judge too. But you have to develop your own, because I did learn very quickly that trying to go use a lawyer's hypotheticals in jury selection ain't going to work for you if you can't do it. I mean, I failed miserably on that one. I remember one of my first trials, I'm trying to say something and the juror literally looked at me and was like, what?
It just wasn't authentic.
It just was not.
Right. Yeah.
It's about, if it's reasonable doubt and you bring your umbrella, you probably heard this one, it's going to rain. I was like, and then I just flubbed the whole thing. And then I just wanted to run out of the courtroom screaming. Yes. So you just have to be authentic. Then I learned child abuse cases. I learned that you know, what the defense is going to say if you didn't do. And I always brought everything that you could ever have. So there was never a question of, when they stood up in closing argument, well, the state didn't show you this, that, or that. Even if it was irrelevant, I'd put it up there.
Right. Because you knew it was
because I knew
story.
the full,
Yes.
no matter what. Then I was bringing it. And then there was never that question of, because then that's, even if, then they couldn't come back and argue that. But that took, years of doing it.
Yes. Well, I think it's really vital that you surround yourself and you go watch as many great lawyers or great whoever's, whatever business that you're in, as many greats as you can get your hands on, and try to take a little bit, but always remember that it has to be authentic to you. You can't stand up. I remember I was working with a young lawyer once, and she said, I just can't do the Lisa Blue, what's in your heart of hearts. I don't speak like that. And I said, well, then don't do that. Like, nobody said that you have to do that. That works great for her, and she's the best of the best, but you've got to do what is authentic to you, because like most folks, juries will sniff out the insincerity.
Well, the thing that I find interesting between when you were working as a prosecutor and your practice now, you learned back then that you needed to share the whole story.
Everything.
And so now in your practice, you are basically laying out the whole story for that person before they can just render judgments, render opinions. I mean, all that experience, you've bottled it up and you've moved it forward in your current practice. Like, it's impressive.
Well, I don't, and because I think a lot of times, as a defense, it's not your job to do that. The state's got to prove it, right? So, and that works for some defense attorneys. I'm not giving them that, they have to prove it, and they do have to prove it. The burden is on them. It never shifts to the defense.
But you know how people think.
But I just, I have found for me and for my situations, because a lot of them have severe mental health issues or this, and if you were a prosecutor looking at it and you just read a police report, you'd be like, wow, dang, this is dangerous. But then there's this, 20-year-old kid that there's all these other circumstances that were happening. And now we have developed a whole treatment plan and a whole aftercare plan. And if he's given the shot, this is what, So it's worked.
Along those lines, too, I was just thinking about, taking the person as a person.
Yes.
You were telling us that your new passion is really getting involved with parole issues. So talk to us about that. How did you decide that was something that you wanted to get involved in? How can you kind of shape that process? What does that look like?
It was interesting because I was contacted by someone, his name is Damon West, and he speaks all over the place. He was convicted. I don't know if y'all remember the Uptown burglar, that case. It was way back, but he was convicted. He was given 65 years in the pen. And then we went into the penitentiary and changed his life, changed all these people's lives, got out on parole in the first time because it wasn't an aggravated offense, and then now speaks all over the country. He's like one of the most sought after speakers about this coffee bean message that he has. It's like what happens in hot water. So before he went to the penitentiary, he met a guy in jail, an older gentleman, that told him, when you go down there, you can be three things. You're gonna be in hot water. You can be a carrot that goes soft, right? An egg that becomes hard, or you could become a coffee bean, which turns into coffee.
Yeah.
And so he's
so
shared
cool.
this message all over the country. I had no idea. I just met him in April, and he had filed a post-conviction writ that was denied, and they got it recused, and it came in front of me. And then we had recommended that he get a new punishment. It was still denied. But then I just saw him on LinkedIn, and I barely even know how to do anything. So I just sent a connect. I was like, this guy's doing great things, And then he said, do you remember who I am? And I said, no, because I had so many cases. and he had written a book, and it was evidently I had been in that book that was, and so he is very involved in TDCJ. And then we started talking about parole issues. He introduced me to one of the very best parole attorneys in Austin, Gary Cohen, and I started talking to him. And it just seemed like for me, for what I'm doing, because there's 135,000 inmates in TDCJ, and they come up on parole, and a lot of these folks have been there a long time and are rehabilitated, and it just really kind of piqued my interest that maybe this is something that I could be really good at. And the more I've learned at it, and the more I've, looked at it, and just, it's more like kind of like being on the bench on when someone's coming in front of you as a plea. What do you decide to do? Giving these individuals another shot. So it's new area, and I'm excited about it. I'm kind of getting involved in it, and still have to learn.
Yeah. How do you feel about it just seems like your whole, like the last few years has been just about growth and kind of leaning into what you truly believe in. How did you get to that point? I mean, we all want to get to that point as quick as possible in our lives, right?
We're doing what we love.
How can you help just kind of guide people in a way to where they'll lean into what they're truly passionate about without getting just completely taken over by it?
To be honest, in my favorite quotes, the man in the arena, y'all know that quote, right?
Yeah.
I only had one way to go, and it was up.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, by the time I resigned, and it was so bad, it was either give up. And, I was extremely suicidal for a while. I had to really, it just was, I only had one way to go. And so when I just said, I get back up and I don't give up, and I keep trying. And thing I'm good at is helping people at the same time. But I know first and foremost, I have to make sure I'm taking care of myself first.
Yeah.
But also finding what you're good at. I mean, I'm 54, so everybody's like, well, go do this kind of law and go do that kind of law. And I thought, well, maybe I'll start trying to do that. I'm not good at any of that.
Right.
And I, someone said, why would you go back to Dallas County? That's, that has to be so hard. And I was like, that's where I grew up. I mean, I was 23 years old when I went there, and I left at 46. And I love those people there. I love so many people there. So, but I do go all over the state and practice. And so, I think someone might be in a crisis, suffering. Don't give up hope. I mean, when you give up hope, you've lost everything. And I had some really good people come, like Terry Hill. And I don't know if y'all have ever met Terry Bentley Hill. She's fantastic.
Yeah.
But she talks all over the state about suicide. And she has, she lost her husband and a child to suicide. And she's a criminal defense attorney. She was by my side, and, I just had family and support there. But a lot of time, it was difficult for my family because they didn't understand it. And I think a lot of people looked at me and thought, well, you're at the top of your game. What's your problem?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? And that's the worst thing you can say, because then you really think something's wrong with you,
Sure.
So I just think that it's getting help. It's asking for help, knowing when to step back, take a breath, and then just,
And letting yourself.
Yeah. And I still find myself apologizing. We do that sometimes as women.
That's my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah.
It's mostly women that do it.
I do it sometimes.
I'm like,
I'm sorry, Kellye. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And another thing I think we do, and I felt myself doing, is we shrink ourselves and make ourselves small because we feel like we failed and we're this. And, I'm going to put myself in this box, and this is who, and I have to fight that still.
Sure.
I still have that tendency when I feel a little uncomfortable or all that. And I have to really take a pause and say, there's no reason to do that.
No. And making yourself small doesn't keep out people that are going to judge you. It doesn't make things easier necessarily. I have found, because I do the same thing, I have found that instead, when I stick out my chest and put my shoulders back, I feel more prepared.
It's so funny you say that, because so many times when I'm like, sit up straight, even though y'all giving me a booster chair. Sit up straight and put your shoulders back, and I
Well,
think
that's like that 10-minute TED Talk that I talk about with Amy Cuddy. She's like, go in the bathroom for 2 minutes, put put your hands on your hips.
And look at your.
Yeah, because it
Is
just.
that the one that says look at yourself and say you're a badass?
Yes, your cortisol goes down, the testosterone, whatever the things that are supposed to shift in your body shift when you do that. And it's just taking that moment for yourself.
Yeah.
So that you can be prepared when you're going in, or I don't know, like you said, decompressing when you're coming out of something that
Instead of waiting.
Yeah.
I mean, because, like yesterday I went and I can't get in details of it because it's a pending case, but it was extreme. And I found, I took 2.5 hours just, and before I would have been just, and just let it kind of soak in and think about it. And that's only going to make me more effective along the way.
I think I've mentioned this before. I remember one time I got home from a really tough witness prep in a criminal case. Our good friend Toby Shook, he always gets some very exciting cases. But I got home and I was, this case is over now. It was a father who was charged with murdering his son, and it was an accidental discharge. But nevertheless, his son was dead. And I got home after 4 hours of prepping this man to testify. And I just thought, I am so drained. And sure enough, I'd been home for about 5 minutes and my phone is ringing. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just not going to take that call. I'm not. And then I kind of struggle with, I got to take the call. But I just you have to take a moment for yourself.
Yeah. And
Well, and so where do you see your practice going? Like, what's your vision?
My vision is, it just creating this practice where it's, I'm making a living too in doing this, but I always say that my end game on this is to create a nonprofit for indigent defense, because I had a client where, he was able to pay for all the witnesses, able to pay for all the experts, and they dismissed the case finally after 4 years. And, but then there's other clients that could not have, if they didn't have the money to hire an attorney that could do all this, they would probably be in the penitentiary.
Right. Well, that is still an unfortunate
and that's the thing is, so how do we, how do we get to an end game where we could create something, and it might be that, you have to take certain amount of cases each year and look at them, and then we can provide all those expert witnesses for them.
Do you know, I recently had a criminal defense lawyer who petitioned the judge to let the state pay for my services.
And they will do that.
They will. And I think not enough people realize, it kind of goes to your point that sometimes you get the best criminal defense only if you can afford it. And so making all of those resources.
And I also think you just adding a little bit of humanity back to criminal. I always say to my clients, you're never a defendant, you're never an inmate number, or a TDCJ number, or a parolee or probationer. You're my client. Mm-hmm. And you're a person. You came in here as a person, you're going to leave here as a person, no matter what. And it's just, that's the way I feel, that if we can all kind of embrace that, at least we're all human, or just start talking about it. Yeah. Just start talking about it. Of course it's easier, of course I'm not always perfect and I make a lot of mistakes, of course, but I try to learn from them.
Sure.
And do better the next time.
It's really all we can do. I think that's a great note to end on. Susan, thank you so much for sharing with us and just being so open and giving us so much that we can take away and just try to get better every day at what we do.
Well, thank you so much for including me. I love visiting with you, ladies.
You're inspiring.
Oh gosh, you all are too. Thank you.
All I can say is wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just everything that you're doing today, learning all about how it's changed and evolved in the criminal system. And I was going to ask you, I'm just curious, are there walls that you're hitting that you're just like, okay, we need to penetrate this one? You're putting together the plan and it's working and people are seeing that it's working. So now I'm just curious, are there
I'm sure
walls?
There will be. That's the next thing.
Okay.
But I just love it. All I can do is try.
Yeah.
And try my best.
Yeah.
And that's all we're getting asked to do. And that's what I'm just going to do. I know that I've evolved as a person. I know that I've changed as a person, and I believe people can change. You hear, that people can't change. I absolutely believe people can change, because I know you can, and I know you can get on the other side.
Let's do this again next year.
Okay. Yeah. I love it.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Ladies in Law. We hope you're walking away inspired and ready to shake things up in law and business. Don't forget to hit subscribe and let us know what you think. Spread the word and share this podcast with your network. Follow us on socials for all the behind-the-scenes fun and sneak peeks of upcoming episodes. Until next time, keep rocking it, keep breaking the mold, and as always, keep aspiring to inspire.